If you thought Jimmy Rodgers was a good coach before, hold on to your hats. Now that he has access to everything the Big 12 has to offer, I'm pretty sure he's going to go undefeated.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, my name is Nick Marovets, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we are talking all about Jimmy Rodgers and what he had to say at his first media availability once fall camp kicked off. We got three main topics we're going to go over. There's a lot to unpack between him and everything else that's been said over the last few days, so make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. But today, just three topics. Number one, new tech. Is Jimmy Rodgers going to go undefeated? Because he's been held back up until this point. And we'll go over that and what I mean by that in just a second. Then in the second segment, we're going to talk about the fact that nothing is guaranteed. Stick around to see exactly what I mean by that. And to round out today's show, we're going to take a look at the concept that Jimmy Rodgers is betting on himself and voting for this Iowa State team. His answer to the question about the Big 12 Media Days voting situation has me fired up, to say the least. So can't wait to round out today's show with that. But we have to start with the concept that Jimmy Rodgers has been playing single-handed up until this point in his career. All right. Jimmy Rodgers hired way back in December. One of the first things, because remember, Jimmy Rodgers wasn't really on the radar. Matt Campbell leaving wasn't really on the radar. So all of a sudden, boom, Jimmy Rodgers is your head coach, like out of nowhere. And first thing everyone does, go ahead and look up, who is this guy? What has he done? What are his accomplishments? I think it's a relatively solid list. What he did at South Dakota State, what he was able to do with 1 year, essentially, and the amount of turnover that he had last season at Washington State. There's a lot to be excited about. But he did all of that, like I said, with one hand tied behind his back. Jimmy Rodgers said, from the sports science thing here at Iowa State, the amount of knowledge and intel that we get on the player's body, I've never had access to what we have access to here. Now, I am not going to assume that he's saying we've never had any intel at all. We have never had any clue, inkling of what the players like. I find that hard to believe. I'm sure that there are a few things that Iowa State has that some other schools that obviously South Dakota State's going to have different resources than Iowa State, right? So I imagine some of those things are going to be different. Washington State, I can't imagine is that far behind Iowa State. I haven't personally been in the room, this year. I don't know what they're dealing with as far as what, is it the catapults? Is it the Polaris? Is it what exactly is Jimmy Rodgers getting from the sports science standpoint? And to be completely honest, I toyed with, are we going to talk about this? Are we not going to? I've kind of landed on the fact that it doesn't really matter from our perspective what exactly Jimmy Rodgers has access to. All right. Force plates, whether it's, distance traveled, average speed, number of sprints, number of percentage reps at this percentage of heart rate, like it gets pretty in depth. I'm not here to break all that down. I absolutely could. And I'd have a blast doing it. It's not really the point. It's ultimately where I land on this thing. What we know, what we should focus on is that Jimmy Rodgers hasn't had access to any of this. That is incredible. I almost thought about doing the entire show on this, so we have to speed run this, okay? Because I have a lot I want to get to. One, never had access to any of this before and still found the amount of success that he did. That feels like maybe now that he has this under his belt, well, I guess I should answer the question, what could potentially change? Well, for one, limited injuries, and I'll get to that in a second. Two, you peak at the right times if you have the right knowledge, right? And I'll get to another quote that he said in just a second, but it's really about peaking. And then number three, I would say, honestly, morale, to be completely honest, like understanding where the players are at. This deeper, it's not just like, how do you feel today? Oh, you feel good? Obviously, you told me you feel good because I'm the coach. Go out there and run 100 sprints. Like that's kind of, I know it's not that, but that's kind of the idea that we're getting away from, as opposed to, all right, we're seeing a strain score here based on this, this, and this. This is what's being reported. This is the numbers we're getting. So this guy, we're going to have, do this because this is where he's at. You keep players fresh. You keep them from getting injuries. And in theory, their morale is higher as well. Now, that's not guaranteed. That's not a linear, correlation, but there is something to be said about that. A couple other quotes that I wanted to get to really quick. He said, having a strength staff that's really well equipped to be able to handle the numbers and handle the player load, that has been new. So I don't know if that's what he's talking about when he's talking about the access, because the numbers that I've seen aren't all of the numbers, and those numbers are crazy, right? What do I make of this? That's like if someone had never watched the NFL before and you told them, yeah, that guy passed for 650 yards in this game. You'd be like, okay, what's a lot? What's not? Is that any good? I know it's hard to imagine not knowing how many passing yards are good for a football game, for an NFL game, but that's kind of like when you look at these numbers, it's like I don't have a frame of reference. What am I supposed to do with this? 16? What is this 16? 16 what's? And how many's a lot? So having the knowledge to be able to apply what that 16 means into the game plan moving forward it's crucial. It's literally how the whole thing works. And Jimmy Rodgers has the people to be able to do that. And so when talking about applying those numbers, he talked about he's kind of changed the way that they install. I'm just going to read a few quotes here because I want to get through all these and then I'll get to my thoughts. He said, today was a red zone and goal line. It was the first day of fall camp, right? So today was red zone and goal line. I've never started with red zone and goal line. He also said it's really easy to decrease the amount of soft tissue injuries. He said, we're going to do our best to limit those things. He said, we've thought out ahead as far as the amount of player load and the length of practice. And then he also went on to say, I've been under one system for a long time. It's hard for me to look at a practice script on day one and be like, this is all we're doing. I have to fight myself on that. A lot to unpack there. All right. Like I said, I'm trying to speed run this. I could have made this a whole show. I'm choosing not to. I feel like that deserves a subscribe right down below. It's completely free. First thing, the ability to adapt with new information is crucial, huge. That's a big deal. Jimmy Rodgers getting all this information and being like, well, I guess we got to change how we do things. We got to make adjustments here because it'd be easy for him to look at those numbers and say, come on, we've been doing things like this. It's sort of worked. Like, let's just do this. And I'll come back to that point in just a second. The ability to adjust, I think, is huge for Jimmy Rodgers. When you're looking at the amount of soft tissue injuries, I just wanted to really quick, address that, if you will. The last few years have been brutal for Iowa State as far as injuries goes. And sometimes they're completely unavoidable. I am not saying anything against those last few years and who was in charge and whatever. Take that how you will. Because it's always going to be a part of the game, right? Like even this regime has already got injuries under their belt that they have to deal with. That's just a part of the game. It's football. It's a physical sport. It asks a lot of your body. But at the same time, at least Jimmy Rodgers is going into this with the mindset of we got to make some changes. We're trying to keep everybody healthy. I know it sounds crazy, but this could have easily not been talked about. This was not, I don't believe this was directly asked about, if I remember the question correctly. So him bringing this up, talking about the changes, it could have easily just been yeah, we're doing what's best for the team. That's kind of where I'm looking at this. Okay, he's making a concerted effort to make sure everybody's healthy. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes it just so happens that, it was unavoidable. And that's relatively common. But there are times too where it's why did this exact thing happen? Well, it's related to the amount of reps and the amount of, to put it in Jimmy Rodgers' words, tread that's been worn off the tire. Once you get fatigued, once you get tired, you don't land in the same way. You don't attack that rep the same way. And it's not conscious. You're not I'm going to compensate and load this into my hip a little bit more because I feel like I'm tired in my tibialis anterior. Nobody says that. Nobody says that. It's just a part of human physiology. And all of a sudden you've got an injury. And so Jimmy Rodgers adapting to the new information that he has, the plethora of information really that these different types of technologies give coaches is insane. And it sounds like he really wants to do what's best for the team. I'm going to round out this point in just a second, and then we have to get to nothing's guaranteed. What do I mean by that? Coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Game Time. There are more alive events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple, with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. For me, the biggest thing when it comes to buying tickets is knowing what I'm going to see when I sit in my seat. I don't understand the graphic. I don't know exactly what I'm looking at. Section, row, it's a picture that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. Game Time makes it possible to see the exact view from my seat, so I don't have to second guess. I can just buy, go, and enjoy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. First thing we got to do is round out my thought process on the new tech for Jimmy Rodgers that he's got access to. And then we need to get into what do I mean by nothing is guaranteed. I'll get to it in just a second. But first, I want to thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day and remind you can get your daily Cyclones fix completely ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to your team without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes or go to lockedoncyclones.supercast.com to claim your free trial. All right. Final thoughts on this whole equipment, tech, new info situation. This could lead to Jimmy Rodgers getting the team ready in a way that hasn't really been seen before. Is this going to overcome the amount of talent that the team has? Not necessarily, okay? It doesn't really change the DNA of how a team is built. It just prevents injuries and gets players ready in a different way. And I say that to voice a small amount of concern. This is good information to have. It absolutely is. But I want to just reference the idea that stats can be taken in either way. This is not statistics as much as it is like data, which I understand is statistics, but hear me out. If you see the statistics on a fourth down, well, stats say go for it. And then in this situation, stats say don't go for it. You can word stats in any way to support any point, really, especially in sports. I want to just throw out the idea that sometimes you look at all these numbers. If they're taken too far, you can sometimes get away from what you do as a coach. And I'm not saying Jimmy Rodgers is doing this by any means. I am not saying that at all. I think he is very, very smart and understands where to defer and allow coaches to do their thing and where he's got to step in and those kinds of things. That's very real. I'm not saying that he's letting this get out of hand. I just worry a little bit that he's like, oh, new numbers, and let's see what happens and do exactly what the numbers say. And he gets away from his method of success. That's the only thing I was slightly worried about. But honestly, to me, this sounds like this is all a huge win, right? Give him all of the information he never had and see what he does with it. I really believe Jimmy Rodgers can do some really good things. Now, to answer the question, what is nothing is guaranteed all about? Why did I put that over there? What I'm talking about is a concept that nobody is given a spot. I know it's pretty cut and dry, pretty self-explanatory at this point, but Jimmy Rodgers talked about the idea that everyone is going to be competing and everyone's going to be competing hard for a spot all camp long. Nobody is given anything. When talking about, Jalen Raynor, when asked about Jalen Raynor, he talked about like, yeah, I mean, he's the guy, like he's the guy getting the ones right now. But he's not guaranteed anything. He said nothing is set. You know, Jalen started camp with the ones, but there are opportunities everywhere. And so that right there, I think if I asked you, which position group are you most confident in who's starting? I feel like Jalen Raynor would probably be right up there for number one. If you had to pick one guy, like maybe Isaac Terrell, you know, even at running back, I'm not entirely sure I'd know who I'd pick. I don't think I'd know exactly what wide receiver I'd pick. I don't think I'd know exactly which linebacker I'd pick. Like, I don't feel confident in really any position besides maybe quarterback. And I'd say quarterback I feel best about, and then maybe defensive line. And even then, Jimmy Rodgers is like, well, he's not guaranteed anything. And the way he talks, I didn't want to talk about this for a whole segment, but I do love the way that Jimmy Rodgers talks, does his media. The way he answers questions is fun. It's a lot of fun. And so the way he's talking about, these players and having to compete, how are they going to handle like practices? What are the mental errors looking like? How hard are they, physically straining? The ability to make the plays is what it really comes down to at the end of the day. Like it was just like it is what it is. Like they're going to get it or they're not, And so I love the concept. Ultimately, what I want to get to here is, and this was asked about, Jimmy Rodgers was actually asked directly about this, but the concept that there's pre-existing starters on some teams, I think can affect the way that things work, to put it as vaguely as I possibly can. For example, I don't know. Like, let's go to the extreme. When Tom Brady was in the peak of his career, did any of the backups at New England really feel like they had a legit solid chance at beating out Tom Brady at OTAs or whenever that would be decided for Belichick? I'm guessing not. Each quarterback's going to be different. Some are probably going to say, yeah, of course I have a chance to beat out Tom Brady. Like, give me a chance. I'm going to take it. It was obviously never really materialized. But my point is, when you have like pre-existing starters, and I know the NFL is completely different. I just wanted to literally go to the absolute extreme because I don't think anybody was really starting over Tom Brady in his peak, in his prime, right? When you have that, oh, well, he's going to be the starter and this guy's going to take up this and this guy's going to do that. I think underneath that surface level, the starters, you just get a different product. You get a different amount of preparation. You get a different amount of buy-in. You get a different amount of care, really. Buy-in and care are the same thing. But with this, the way this roster is constructed and the way that Jimmy Rodgers is handling it, I think is unique, and it's going to lead to a deeper team. I really think that. I don't know. He said we'll find out down the road here that the players will kind of start to separate themselves. So it's not like it's going to be a complete, he didn't say this, but it's not going to be a complete mystery forever who's going to start, right? I think it'll become clearer with time. But for now, not going into fall camp with the idea, well, I'm probably not going to play. And this really comes down to the freshmen is probably the biggest talking point, because the freshmen now under the 5-5 thing, like if they're ready to play, go play them. And Jimmy Rodgers talked about like some of the freshmen have the bodies, like the body's types, the size and the really the stuff that you can't control, like how fast they are, like height and weight, to be players out on the field. They need to get the mental side up, and they probably need to get their size and strength up a little bit. He did say that. But like they're potentially ready to go. Maybe it's week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, whatever it is. Are you ready to go, jump in the game and make a big difference? Those freshmen maybe wouldn't have been asked to do that, week 7, week 8, week 4, middle of the season, whatever it is. With redshirts being the way that they were before, as opposed to now where there's not really a penalty for play. You can play 5 games in your freshman year and it doesn't change anything. All that is now is 5 games under your belt, right? If you've played 4 games or you've played 3 games, there's no decision on like, well, is he going to play or are we going to redshirt him? Like, it's literally like, just play him. If he's good enough, play him, because more reps is good. There's no extended timeline. There's no way to get him another year. So just play him. So that's really where he was mostly focusing, was on the freshmen. Get ready. We'll put you in whenever you're ready. Like, if you can help the team win, you will be in the game, kind of a thing, because there is no reason to hold them back anymore. But I think it applies to everybody. And I think it's a mindset that the entire team is working with. Speaking of mindset, Jimmy Rodgers, my goodness, he's got a mind of his own. I mean, it's special the way that Jimmy Rodgers thinks. And I want to get to his voting for Iowa State to win the Big 12 coming up right here after this. So at the Big 12 Media Days, all the coaches were asked who's winning the Big 12. And there was one vote for Iowa State. Iowa State, I don't remember who they were over, but they were in the championship game one time, and they won that game by the coach that predicted. And when I first saw it, I was like, that is awesome. I don't know who picked Iowa State, but shout out to them. And it was live mid conversation with you. You were here with me. When I realized, Jimmy Rodgers probably did that. It doesn't make really a lot of sense for anybody else to pick Iowa State. They're being picked dead last game. Well, let's say poll after poll after poll, right? They are not being picked to win the Big 12. They're not hardly being picked to win enough games to go to a bowl, right? That's just not where Iowa State is at right now. And I have nothing against anybody saying otherwise. I feel like that's pretty standard at this point. That's just how people feel. And that's fine. But to say that another coach probably picked Iowa State was kind of ridiculous. And so I was like, you know what? Jimmy Rodgers definitely did that. And then Jamie Pollard comes out and confirms it. Boom. That's all I needed to know. That's all I needed to hear. Jimmy Rodgers picked Iowa State to win a Big 12 championship. And a lot of people were surprised by that, which I found to be interesting. Like, well, I don't know. I would have been more surprised if, I don't know, Kalani Sitake was like, yeah, I do think Iowa State's going to win it this year. What? That would have been much more shocking to me than your own coach picking your team. Nonetheless, he was asked about it at this media availability post fall camp day one. And he said, I'm just going to read the quotes. He said, I believe we can win. I wasn't hired for my disposition. I was hired to create a program that competes and wins. We're not signing up for second place. The players have to believe what you say. And then he said, I believe that we can win. I'm going to get to the last few quotes here in just a second. But ultimately, we've talked about this a few times. I just want to reiterate that's Coach Rodgers right there. He is absolutely through and through the right guy for Iowa State. Let me put it that way. He's, you got coaches out there, X's, O's, Jimmy's, Joe's, whatever, right? Jimmy Rodgers is the personality that Iowa State needs right now. He believes in Iowa State. He believes in the product that he's built up until this point. And he is going to will this team in the right direction. I'm not going to say he's going to will this team to 10 wins. I'm not being ridiculous. But your coach generally has a pretty big impact on your team and how they play. Is that ridiculous to say? I don't think so. I don't think that's absolutely crazy. So when your coach has this underlying feeling like, oh, it's going to be an uphill battle this year, whether it's talking to media, whether he's talking to other coaches, wherever it happens, players are everywhere. It's a big team. They're everywhere all the time, talking to strength staff. Ooh, I don't know about these guys, versus we're winning the Big 12. Yeah. Why wouldn't we win the Big 12? I believe in our guys. I believe in him. I believe in him. I believe in him. These are the three guys. This is another guy. We've got this going on, this right here, our coaching staff. I believe in us. You start to feel that, which is not good for me as somebody who has no repercussions for speaking into this microphone and saying Iowa State's going to go win a national championship, right? The players, it's a little bit different, right? They believe and they go do. And then if they don't win a national championship, it's not the same as me saying, well, they're going to win a title. I have to hold myself back a little bit here. I really am a big fan of what Jimmy Rodgers brings mentality-wise to Iowa State. And a few other quotes that he threw out here at the end. He talked about, every year is a new team. And the way that he was talking about ultimately how this team shouldn't be valued in a different way than any other team, versus Iowa State's past, or I guess he didn't say you can't compare them to other teams, in college football, but ultimately what he was getting at was we're going to build a really good team every single year. Especially with the transfer portal, you have the ability to build at a different rate, a different way, honestly. And so Jimmy Rodgers talking about, building a new team, and this is a new team every single year, had me thinking there is no reason not to believe in this squad. They put this team together for a reason. I'm not seeing this team as of right now. When we get to the middle of December and Iowa State has won 4 games or whatever, it's a hypothetical situation, I'll probably feel a little bit differently. But for now, the way Jimmy Rodgers is talking, I have no reason to be like, well, he didn't have really as much runway as many of the other coaches out there. I mean, look at how many guys left the program, but he built his own team. Like, he doesn't need the guys that were here previously. If they decided to stay, like, obviously Jimmy Rodgers wanted them on the squad for a reason. If they decided to go, Jimmy Rodgers built his own team. So I'm not doing this to say, well, Iowa State's going to go out and win 9-10 games. I'm not doing this to convince myself that Iowa State's going to be competitive. I'm not doing it for really any reason other than I really like where his head is at. That's how you have to address a team like this. It would be hard, I feel like, as a player to look around in January and say, yeah, we got a lot of continuity here. I know what he's going to do on that play. I feel really good about where we were last season. We were a few plays away when over half the team isn't even from here and everybody else is from all across the board, right? Who's here? Who was here? Who feels this way? Who feels that way? Who did this at their other school previous year? Did they come up short? Who saw it? Who didn't? Doesn't matter. Everybody forget it. This is this year. We're not worried about what happened last year. We're not worried about what's happening next year. We're worried about right now. And in this case, fall camp, day 1, or fall camp, day 2, or fall camp, day 3. Like, that's the way Jimmy Rodgers is going about this. And along the entire way saying, we're good enough to win a title. We're good enough to win the Big 12. We're good enough to do this. We're good enough to do that. Like, living it, breathing it, feeling it, speaking it every single day. The way he talks, I would love to be in one of his huddle conversations. And I was just thinking about this. I'll leave you with this today. I was watching his press clippings or media availability, whatever you want to call it, post fall camp day 1. I was thinking back because everybody's putting out media right now. And the Michigan State coach had his speech. And I remember when Jimmy Rodgers put out his first, or I don't even know, I don't think he released it, but the first Jimmy Rodgers speech was put out. And I was like, I came on here and I said, I'm not impressed. It's missing something. But it was one of those things where it really felt like looking back now, I can say it feels like I picked up a book based on the cover and the first page was like, I'm not really impressed. You made it a page, brother. Trust the process a little bit. I'm not saying to judge a book by its cover. I'm not saying that's what I did. I'm just saying I picked up a book in some situation and wasn't impressed by the first page. Play it out. He seems like the perfect coach for Iowa State. I could not be more excited for what he brings from a mentality standpoint and, to be completely honest, from an X's and O's standpoint. And we're going to break down that more tomorrow, to be completely honest, and then next week, because there's a lot coming out right now. So make sure you hit subscribe down below. It's completely free. Helps us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. That's all I've got for today. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.